Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 115 for Tuesday, May 20th, 2025. This episode we'll be talking about the secret project being developed at Naughty Dog, SAG-AFTRA going after Epic over Darth Vader, and Hideo Kojima has plans for after his death. We'll have all that and some talk about Doom the Dark Ages. My name is Justin Young. I'm joined as always by Alicia Utecht and Mario Sanders. How are the two of you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah, finally had a chance to breathe now that the semester's done and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it took a kind of just chilled this past week. Didn't really get into I've got stuff I got to do over the summer, but I figured, give some time to just relax a little bit.
I think a week break is well earned after a full school year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess we should talk about there's actually some pretty big news, speaking of end of the school year and going into the next school year. Alicia, you've got a new job.
I do. I have a real person job. I accepted
Not like those lowly grad students, Mario.
Pathetic.
I have a job that will pay me like a real person. Yeah, I accepted a visiting assistant professor of theater design position at DePaul University. That's not DePaul, as my dad kept asking, are you sure it's not DePaul? And I'm like, Dad, I'm reading it. It is a W, not an L.
Think of it more like how a dog describes what's wrong with it. DePaul.
DePaul. So that's in Greencastle, Indiana. I'll be starting August 11th. So very excited for that. I got to do my on-campus interview a couple weeks ago. I'm going back out later this week to find a place to live. And I really loved it out there. Everybody was really nice, really sweet. The space itself reminds me a lot of Villanova, where I did my master's, and I miss the living daylights out of that, so I'm very excited to have the chance to kind of revisit that type of environment.
Well, congratulations. We're all super excited for you. That obviously means that at some point you'll be leaving the Saluki Gamescast. We're not going to deal with that right now, though.
Yeah, I'll say we got time.
This is not your final episode.
No.
But that is sad, obviously, for you to be leaving, but also we're super excited for you. So we'll save the goodbyes for later for that.
Yes.
So we're headed into summer. I am teaching one class currently online. That ends at the end of May. And so...
Is that the video game class?
No, this is Intro to Public Relations.
Are you teaching the game class online over the summer?
I am scheduled.
Okay.
If it gets enough enrollment.
That makes sense. Okay.
So I have not checked it. It doesn't start till July. So I have not checked it lately. But yes, that is the plan.
Okay. I remember seeing it in an email from somebody, but I hadn't asked you about it.
I like that you also have the memory of me when it comes to emails I've received. Somebody sent me an email. I don't know.
I figure it's either from Sandy or Christina, because it was about, I'll be teaching 101 over the summer, and they said you have to sign up for a class. Yeah. I don't have to. I'll be taking dissertation credits, but they had listed a couple of the classes that were available.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, too bad you've already taken that class.
I have already taken that one.
And otherwise we're headed into summer. I guess for people not local to the area who maybe don't know, we had some pretty insane storms this past weekend. I guess Friday night was when those storms hit. Tornadoes basically went from St. Louis all the way through this area into eastern Kentucky.
There was a big one in Marion.
Yeah. It was like an EF4.
That's what I saw as well.
Which I guess EF5 is the top level one. That's what you see in Twister.
Yeah.
But this was, it left a trail. You can they were showing a drone shot and you could see where it had tore through woods.
Yeah.
And left a path. So I know destroyed some homes and did quite a bit of damage, and they're still, collecting like toiletries and things like that for some of the families that were affected. I don't think anybody was killed in the Marion area from it.
I hadn't seen or heard anything about that,
But
so hopefully that is the case.
I'll say we'll take no news as good news for that one.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, kind of scary, those storms, particularly like one of them hit in St. Louis, which you don't normally think of big cities getting tornadoes within the city limits, right? And that was pretty striking to see some of that damage and everything. But hopefully everybody recovers well and everything. I know there's been a great outpouring of support in this local area, so that's been good to see in the face of tragedy. All right, why don't we move on to what you've been playing? Alicia, what have you been playing?
It's honestly been a very low key. Still playing like Pokemon TCG Pocket and like my different phone games, but I also started getting into a couple of new ones that are nonogram puzzles. So it's like a big grid and then it'll give you like, okay, there's 9 filled in spots on this line, and there's like 1 and 6, so you'll have to fill in 1 square, and then there's so many gaps in between before the 6 in a row.
Sorry. I'm sorry. There's a type of game that I'm thinking of, and I can't think of it. So
Picross.
Picross is what I'm thinking of. It's
Yeah.
similar to something like that.
Yeah, very similar.
That's cool.
I think it is like those are the same game. It's
Okay.
just
Yeah.
different names.
That's the
Yeah, Picross
Generic
is a nonogram puzzle. Yeah. Yeah, so I've gotten into a couple of those. One of them is actually really, really cool. The app is called Eyes, and I don't know why it's called that, but what it does is each
spelled like
the eyes in your
face.
head.
Okay.
And each one that you do, you will have a set of 25, and once you complete those 25, it'll tell a part of a story, and it'll be just like a couple paragraphs of, it's this kid who runs into the forest and gets chased down by the wolf, and so the deer like gets him out of there and transforms him into a deer to keep him safe, and so I'm like diving into that. Each 25 you get like another couple of paragraphs of the story, and it looks like it's fairly long. I think the first set of 25s has probably like 10 or 15, and then there's like another couple of sets. So that's had me pretty hooked right now, just like diving into that, trying to find more of the story.
There's a really good Konami Picross game available on iOS, and it's all like the puzzles, the pictures that they form at the end are all like references to Konami games.
Ooh.
And like there's several hundred puzzles in that product. And I forget what the exact name, but I think if you search Konami Picross, you'll probably find it. But that's one of the better ones I've found available on iOS, and it's free.
Pixel Puzzle Collection from Konami.
Okay.
Cool. Casually installing it right now.
I enjoyed it quite a bit because it is a whole lot of references to old Konami games, like old arcade games and that sort of stuff. So
yeah. But that's been a lot of what I've been playing. The other thing, I've been watching a lot of Pokemon Emerald Sea Glass, which I might have talked about before.
Is that the new one? You haven't talked about it on here, at least.
Yeah.
Is that the new one that they just released?
It's fairly new. It's a ROM hack of Pokemon Emerald, but it goes
places.
It goes back, and I'm like trying to come up with the word. It goes back and uses like some of the sprites from like Crystal version.
Okay, that's not the same
and
thing.
stuff like that.
Because I want to say they just released a Pokemon Emerald like 2D HD version, the way that they did like the Octopath Travelers and stuff like that. They like a up-resed version. So this is a different thing.
Yeah, different vibe, but very cool. I have to find that. But so it goes back to like some of the Pokemon Crystal sprites, but it also adds in a bunch of mechanics and Pokemon through like Legends Arceus and even some of the Paldeamons actually. And it's a really pretty ROM hack. It is very aesthetically pleasing and it makes me happy. So I've been watching a lot of that. And then the other thing, one of my favorite YouTubers who I mostly watch her for her movie content, she'll do things like she'll get together a bunch of friends and be like, okay, I made trans men watch the pregnant Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, or like I made asexual people watch 50 Shades of Grey.
Excuse me, it's called Junior.
That one.
It is not simply the pregnant Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
That is the official name.
Put some respect on the name of Junior.
But so she does a lot of videos like that are really, really entertaining, really fun. But she also just started on Thursday nights now. She and a friend are playing through the first Ace Attorney game. And she played it when she was in high school. He's never seen it before. So it's like semi-blind for her because she doesn't quite remember everything, but it's completely blind for him, which is so much fun. And like it's a small enough community that, when you participate in chat, they actually see and respond to you. So getting to like actually interact with her and her friend was a lot of fun on Thursday night. I'm excited they got partway through case 2 last week, so I'm excited for coming back to it this week.
Cool.
Yeah, those. I mean, I've never played the Ace Attorney games, but those style of games tend to be some of the more satisfying games to watch people play.
Right. It's like there's something when you've learned everything, and this is one of the things that makes Ace Attorney so incredible for me is like I'm that annoying person about plot twists where I have fun calling plot twists, but then it makes the thing less fun for me. So like when I'm playing them, it's so fun. I was looking back at my text messages to my sister throughout the whole series and being like, called that, but also new information drop, like in that way that a good mystery is, not just like the Sherlock Holmes style where when you're reading Sherlock Holmes, Watson literally doesn't have all the information until Sherlock spells it all out. But like it gives you the information to figure it out. But then when you get to watch someone play it blind and like they don't know anything, and seeing where they might call something or seeing them discover the thing is just so fun.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this before, but there's watching one of the streamers I've watched for a really long time, the same community that I've made a lot of the friends that I've played games with, watching him play through 999 for the first time. Like I went back and he played it before I had ever played it, but I went back and watched that stream because I had never watched it before.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was those were very satisfying, enjoyable watches.
Yeah. That's the same thing. I'm slowly making my way through Lucagen playing Ace Attorney, which, she played the first game like 9 years ago now. So obviously way before I did, but I'm like, let me go see someone experiencing this for the first time.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing as, I think it very much is the same experience of like getting to introduce a friend to your favorite movie, right? Or your favorite TV show, and getting to like watch that with them and them experiencing it for the first time. Obviously, like it's a completely different relationship, but it's that same sort of joy, at least that I have gotten from like very specific game titles.
Yeah.
If they're having the same like sort of joyous reaction that you do.
Of course, yeah.
Because one of the worst things is to share a movie with somebody and they go, "This is horrible."
Yeah, sure.
troglodyte, like you have no taste in film. And I mean, like games are similar in that, like I think sometimes like I love showing somebody a new game that they've never experienced before, but like then you do always have that like concern, like is this person going to hate it? And then I can't watch it if they hate it. Like I'm like, no, like your like complete distaste for this like is ruining like my memory of this.
Yeah, I can't watch people play games they don't like. I suffered through Lucagen playing Pokemon White because I knew that she loved Heart Gold and that she loved Platinum. But like when she played Pokemon White, it was just a meme run, and I was like, girl, I'm doing this because I know you get better, but I can't watch people play games they don't like.
Yeah, I think that just sounds miserable. Like they're clearly miserable probably playing it. Yeah. Watching them sounds pretty miserable as well. I will say there's always that little bit of hope, though, that like something by the end will end up turning them. That's how it was watching The Lord of the Rings with a friend for the first time. She was not into it until the like end of the third movie. She's like, man, that all came together.
Yeah, it did.
What happens in the third film possibly to be like, okay, now it all makes sense?
Well, I think it was more of she felt like everything that had happened up to that point paid off.
Okay.
Like it was just like, she was just like, is like, we're just doing this thing and and so the fact that it led to that payoff, I think was what was so satisfying for her.
It's not like the scene in, what is it, Clerks 3 where they're arguing about the Star Wars trilogy versus the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and he acts out what the Lord of the Rings trilogy is. He's like, it's just people walking. And you know what the second film is? It's more people walking. You know what the third film is? It's people walking, and then they walk up to a volcano, and they throw a ring in it, and that's the end.
I think the other thing was, for her specifically, she didn't realize how old those stories were. So I think she's like, this is just derivative of all of the other fantasies. Like,
okay,
and
fair.
once she realized like, oh, this is the one that like set the trope for every other fantasy. Like, I think you gain another level of respect for it at that point as well.
That's the hard thing with Lord of the Rings now is like people, there are people who come into it not understanding that it set the standard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was when I would teach film and I would show Casablanca. I would have students who would go, well, like every line in this is just a cliche. And I'm like, yeah, because it's where the cliche comes from.
Yeah, everybody's copying this, not the other way around.
I would always point out to them, I'm like, you notice when Rick gets introduced, what does that remind you of? What film? And finally somebody would go, it's like when Han Solo gets introduced in Star Wars. And I said, yes, but like 30 years earlier. Like George Lucas was ripping this off.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and I mean, that's always difficult, right? Like when somebody, we were talking about the video game class. That's difficult sometimes in to like put into context, like, oh, well, like what the original Legend of Zelda is doing, like lots of things have done that, or Adventure, for example, like, well, this just feels like a bad version of the Legend of Zelda. And it's like, well, because Legend of Zelda's pulling from this.
Yeah. I remember the one like January term I taught was also like a games and culture class, and having them play Doom and having all of like the original Doom, and like having all of the Call of Duty players like, this game is terrible. This just doesn't work. How do you do anything in this game? It's like, yeah, well, and it's again, you see like the lineage that like eventually leads to this thing.
Yeah.
Man, I think Doom still holds up. That original Doom is still a very good game. Like, I understand why somebody would have that reaction because it's very non-cinematic in the way that modern first-person shooters are, but
I think a big part of it is also just the way you control it.
Sure.
Especially on a computer with like a keyboard as compared to, people who are used to playing with an actual controller.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway.
No, No, that's interesting. I think that's really interesting. Like watching somebody go back and play something that like you're quite a fan of, to like just see how it hits with them, particularly if it's something that's a decade or two out of date at this point, because games have evolved, right?
Yeah.
Like games have changed, and to like go back and watch somebody experience that and like see if they kind of understand it within that context, right? Like I know, Mario, you recently played through Final Fantasy VII, right? Which is like this hugely influential game at the time, but like to look at that game now is a little, like how much of that game holds up, how much of that game just feels like terribly outdated, right?
Yeah.
I know the similar thing, you played through GoldenEye for the first time like a year or two ago.
For the first time was a few years ago. I replayed it for the first time in a while. Whenever we talked about, I think when it had come out,
I'll say when they put it on.
They put it
Switch
on
Online.
Switch Online.
Yeah.
That was the first time I had played it. I think since that first playthrough. But anyway, yeah, the point stands. I think I would say the same thing about playing Vice City over like the last week or so. It's just
Right.
like,
Yeah.
granted, I mean, as we talked about, that game might have just like never been actually good.
Well, I mean, it was good. It just wasn't like, that's a game that like I completely understand. Like even at the time, it was
Sure,
it was style over substance
Yeah.
to a large degree, and that's because it was an early one of those open world games. I feel like it aged worse than like some of its contemporary games.
Absolutely, and that's one where I think. I mean, I don't know how many opportunities there would be. That would be one to, be interesting to watch somebody play it, like for the first time, because I imagine their response would probably be semi-similar of, wow, the atmosphere is really great, and I'm just really enjoying driving around in this world. I don't want to play the actual game.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of those early, like kind of PlayStation into early PlayStation 2 games, I feel, have probably not aged super well in a lot of situations. I think I talked about it last week. I adore Jumping Flash, but man, like asking somebody to go back and play that game today, like it feels really antiquated. The Tomb Raider games, those games, the original Tomb Raider was amazing when it came out, but it feels terribly antiquated now.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's where it's so impressive how much, like, there are certainly things you could find to complain about and nitpick about it, but how much a game like Super Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time holds up.
Yeah.
Right?
I was just going to say, too, like, Lukagen has never played 64. She's never played Super Mario 64, and she's always refused to. And so for April Fool's Day, she and her husband played a little bit, and everyone is like, Luca, do you understand how rare it is to find a blind playthrough of Super Mario 64 in the year of our Lord 2025? Please play more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that puts into context how good those games were at the time. Like one of the things that's, really difficult to look back at those games, particularly when you like look at all the Crocs and Tomb Raiders and, all these other 3D platformers, is how much of a generational leap that Mario 64 felt at the time. Like it felt like a game had fallen out of the future, like, and was so much further ahead of everything else that was getting released at that time. But like Nintendo has on occasion made games like that, right? The original Super Mario Brothers feels very similar.
Yeah.
Like people love to point out and go, well, there were other side scrollers, and you're like, yes, but it was so much better at that time. I mean, eventually things like Mega Man stuff came after it that, I would say are on equal footing to some level. But at that time it felt so much further ahead of what anyone else was doing.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I cut you off talking about 64 and Ocarina.
Oh, no, I think I have made my point. It's just like, I think it's impressive how much I think you could give either of those games to people who had never played them. Somebody who preferably has like some amount of experience playing games, And they might find it a little clunky in certain sections. Of course, it's still a 30-year-old game at this point. But I think that there's like so much that, again, in terms of like all of its contemporaries, how well those two games in particular hold up is an impressive feat to like kind of always remind yourself of.
Yeah. All right. Is that it, Alicia?
Yes, I forgot we were talking about games I played.
We got very off
into it.
We got very off topic.
Nah, that's good. Yeah.
All right, Mario.
The primary game I've been playing over this past week is called Death Bulge Battle of the Bands. It is a turn-based.
I just love that title.
Heard of this. This is very interesting from the title.
It is a turn-based RPG, I guess. It's more like active time, so it's not like strictly back and forth. You know, if your speed is so much, like you might get 2 turns before the opponent gets a turn. But anyways, it is a Battle of the Bands turn-based RPG. And I think the thing that makes it so interesting and like really great is its combat. You know, usually I feel like those turn-based combat games are always the ones where I'm like, you know, it's fine, I guess. But like this one is doing some really interesting things. And so what it is you have a bar and there are 4 measures on the bar, and each of those can be affected in some way, and your opponent has the same bar with those same measures. And so you can affect those. So like one of those measures can be, you know, sort of, attributed with like pain, where every time it's going through that measure, you lose 10 health. Or you can have soothe, where every time it goes through that measure, you gain 10 health. And so there's a lot of strategizing in terms of like, not just the actual attacks you do, but like the passive effects of the ways that like the measures are, whatever like effect is on those measures at that point in time. But I think the other thing that makes it so interesting is only one of the characters is active at a time, but you can swap those characters at any given time. So like as it's going through the measures, you can swap characters. So like, okay, this character still has a lot of health, so I'll let them take the pain. This character needs to be healed, so I'll let them get this effect. This character has more speed, so I'm gonna let them kind of go through the bar because they're gonna go through it faster than any of the other characters. So I might be able to get like a second attack before the opponent gets to go. And then when it hits it's time to attack, you can still swap between any of those characters. So you can really like stat them out in a particular way. It's like, okay, this character is really just like my speed character to get through the bar. This character is the one who I'm going to attack with. This character is going to be like my tank. So as the enemy is getting closer to attack, I'm going to swap into them so that they can take the hit. And so there's a lot of really interesting strategy to the combat. And even so, there's like different like mods which change your classes similar to like a job system, and they're all like genre based. So like sort of like metal genre based. So like one of them is like avant-garde, and one of them is goth, and one of them is, you know, glam, and they all have their own like different impact on the stats. And I just got one ability for one of the characters that essentially lets them attack twice. And so it's one of those things that I was like, oh, this is just going to like carry me, it feels like, through the rest of the game. But I had beaten one section, and as I got into the next section, I was like, okay, like this is definitely still very strong, but it's not just like press the A button to win, right? Which is how some RPGs end up feeling like at the end. It's just like,
yeah.
I think overpowered.
That's how I talked about with Yuffie in Final Fantasy VII with her ultimate weapon. It really is just like, okay, I just hit the A button and Yuffie will basically solo Sephiroth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it. This was a game that a friend had recommended. So we did that game event in March, and I had said, oh, for people who finish, they could submit a game and I'll play through it.
Yeah.
And so this is the one that I know he had played earlier this year. I think this game is like from 2023, so it's still pretty recent.
It is. I just looked it up.
And he really enjoyed it. I think he basically 100%ed it. And I don't know if I'll necessarily do that, but I definitely do want to, there's like the typical story that you're going through, and then each section has like this legend that you can fight as well. Mm-hmm. And so I'll probably at least like fight all of the legends I have up to this point. And I'm having a really good time. For an RPG, it's not that long. I think, like I said, he 100%ed it, and I think his time in the game is like 24 hours. Mm-hmm. So it's not like an egregious amount of time. I think I'm maybe like 9 hours into the game, and I think I'm getting towards the end. I think I'm in like the final, either the second to last or the last section of the game. Mm-hmm. And that is like fighting all of the, like those super fights in each of the sections up to that point. So if, RPGs are your thing, but you're like, I don't want to devote a ton of time or have to commit a ton of time, I think we'll be having a conversation related to that later. At least I know I will be. I think this was a really good one. I think it's maybe like $20 on Steam. I think I got it on sale for when it was maybe 12 or 13. But
it is $20 on Steam.
I think this is a really good game. And it's one I would certainly recommend to people.
I just looked it up on Steam and was watching some gameplay of it. It has a cool look to it. Like, it has a very sort of Adventure Time sort of like vibe to it, sort of Cartoon Network, modern Cartoon Network, I guess I should stipulate, look to it, which, isn't maybe necessarily my thing, but like at least it has a unique look to it.
Yeah. I would say the other thing about this game, it's very funny. Like I'm chuckling and laughing like quite a bit. Like
that's a rare achievement too in a game.
The like interaction between the characters, like I said, it's these three characters who are in a band together. They're like clearly friends, and so like the bantering that they do is, like I said, it's funny, and that it's always just going to be another win.
Cool.
Yep. So that's really all I've played, at least all that I've played that I would talk about. So
this looks amazing.
Yeah. It's a
amazing.
Pretty big recommend from me.
Yeah, I'm interested because I've really never heard anything of that game prior to you talking about it. All right, I don't usually talk a whole lot about like YouTubers, but I did want to talk about one. I think Mario, you and I have had discussions about this YouTuber before. So the name is One Short Eye, and they do videos sort of particularly old adventure game speed running, particularly focused on like Sierra games, so King's Quest, Space Quest, those sorts of things. And like normally I wouldn't, he himself is not a speed runner, but he does like videos sort of like tracing the history of speed running these games.
Oh yeah.
And so like people have gotten the original King's Quest. So original King's Quest, which comes out in like 1984, and then a sort of redone version in 1987, and is the, one of the foundational games in the adventure game genre, right? Like to this day, people are still like doing referential odes to it. But he sort of traces the speedrun community. People have gotten that game down to less than a minute. So like they can beat that game in 40 seconds. And 40 seconds of not necessarily like breaking the game.
I was going to
like
say, is it glitched or is it...
Well, I mean...
Is it like glitch percent or is it...
Well, no, not like the, like, okay, we're just passing through walls and not actually finishing the game in a correct fashion, right? Like, not the, hey, Super Mario World, we get to the second level and, like, glitch out the game so we just, like, pass through the wall into the, like, final area and win the game, right? Like, nothing like that. this is more like, hey, we have figured out that if you like land on this one pixel, you can cross the river without having to talk to the troll, right? Like that sort of stuff.
Okay.
And it is, his videos are really interesting because like he breaks down the history of, okay, well, here's how they used to speed run it. And then this person came up with this way to like, to get through it faster so that you figured out that the way the game is coded, that if you use the shrinking potion here, or I guess it's a magic mushroom, that you can actually enter through the back door of this area that you normally leave through. And it's really kind of interesting seeing people sort of deconstruct the code of the game in a way that they're still like actually running the game in a sort of traditional fashion, right? Like this isn't, again, a whole lot of we're passing through walls and not actually doing the things that we're supposed to be doing in the game.
Yeah.
And so it becomes like really interesting just to see like how those games are constructed. And I would say like the videos are pretty good if you're somebody who doesn't know a lot about game programming, which honestly I don't. I guess I know more than probably the average person, but like I still feel like I know almost nothing about that subject. So to like figure out like, okay, well, how is this game actually like set up? How is it built? Like how did they code for this thing so that it would happen after you've done this thing? And did they think about people like trying to break that and go in a completely, unusual like order as they go through the game? And so I just think like those videos do a really good job of breaking those down. And those games are so kind of simple to begin with that it really allows them to get into the complexities of the programming of the game.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like, sometimes you see something of like, hey, you can beat Morrowind in a minute and a half. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, it feels like you just broke the game, right? Versus like you actually like have optimized the fastest way to like run through this game in a sort of traditional way of actually achieving everything you're supposed to. And so those are neat to me, but like, they're not usually that interesting to watch.
Well, that's why I was asking if it was glitch or not, because I'm thinking of like when there's one of the big speedrunning tricks in Undertale is to use the punch card, but then you like skip all kinds of gameplay that like in a way that, like you said, feels like walking through walls, and you're not really getting the game experience in a way that other speedrun tricks do still give you that experience, I think. So.
Right. Well, and I just hesitate to say it's not glitch because
it is technically, but it's
I mean, they are definitely doing things that is not how the game was intentionally designed.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, he also does some videos talking about like why those games are so incredibly difficult. I know there's one on King's Quest IV where he talks about the randomization in the game and, like you have a 20% chance that a shark will attack you here. And like, you really have no control over that. I mean, probably there might be some ways to fool with the RNG, right? And the random number generation. But like, generally speaking, the average person playing that game doesn't. And so like, he kind of breaks down like, well, here's the odds of this happening to you here, and this is why this is difficult. But if you go here first, then you have higher odds of this happening. And like, I think that's kind of interesting just to see the like sort of, how the sausage is made in those games, because those games feel at the time back in the 1980s and early 90s when I was playing those games, they could feel completely overwhelming. And to see them broken down that way, you go, oh, no, this is actually much more straightforward than it feels. I feel like a lot of old games are that way. Like you realize, oh, this game is actually takes 5 minutes to finish if you actually have any clue what you're doing.
Yeah.
They just assume that nobody would.
And who'd you say the YouTuber is?
One Short Eye. Yeah, One Short Eye. and does a lot about different speed running. The King's Quest 4 one is particularly good for that, but the King's Quest 1 speed running video is also really good because that's the one where how they got it down to, I think, 42 seconds is the world record, at least at the time of that video. And when you think like beat any game in 42 seconds while actually accomplishing everything in the game is, you set down the average person to play King's Quest 1 today, and you're talking hours and hours of getting through that game.
Yeah.
So anyways, just wanted to kind of shout that out. The other thing that I've been playing is Doom: The Dark Ages. This is the new Doom game. This is the third Doom game in the modern trilogy after Doom, 2016, and then Doom Eternal. This is the one that has a very distinctly sort of medieval vibe to it. I would say actually probably more accurately like a heavy metal album cover from the late 1980s vibe to it.
This is like Hexen or Heretic?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. So when the game first got announced, a lot of people thought there had been some hints that maybe they were working on a new Hexen. Hexen and Heretic are sequels, in the same series. Mm-hmm. There had been some hints that maybe this was going to be a revitalization of that franchise. And then it came out and it was like, oh no, this is Doom. And a lot of people thought, well, so basically you made a new Hexen game and slapped the Doom name onto it because you thought that would sell better. Which, they're probably right.
Yeah.
But I will say when you play this game is very much a Doom game. Mm. That is very much mostly surface level. You have monsters that very much more feel that way. You have new weapons. You have a shield in this game. That shield is attached to a chain. So there's some Rygar details coming into this and everything. So you are the Doom Slayer, and you are battling monsters. The big differences I would say in this is there are more sort of open arena areas in this game than there have been the past two Doom games. It's not open world or anything like that, but you do get more into outside areas where there's more just room to move around and that sort of thing. You are battling sometimes enemies that have sort of armor on them, and you have to weaken that armor, and then you can blow up that armor off of them. So that's one of the ways that you can use your shield is once you've weakened that armor is to you can throw your shield sort of Captain America style. And
I was just about to start singing.
Yeah. And so there's that aspect to it. It has mostly sort of abandoned a lot of the sort of rock, paper, scissors mechanic of Doom Eternal, where Doom Eternal was, okay, well, you have to kill this enemy to get more ammo, and you have to kill this enemy to get more health, and you have to kill them in this particular way, which felt, initially when they showed it off, felt like, oh, well, this is going to make you constantly be thinking while you're in the middle of a battle of how you're going to handle different enemies. But in practice made Doom Eternal kind of a slog to play in comparison to Doom 2016, which is an absolutely amazing, fantastic game. This feels more like a happy medium between those two games, a little bit more complexity in the battle system, but not to the level of Doom Eternal where, again, it felt like a slog, more of a chore. You were having to think too much in the battles, right? Which is not exactly what you want in a Doom game, or at least not for me. And then I guess the two sort of standout things of this game that I think people have been kind of either hyped or trepidatious about is there are segments where you are flying on a dragon, and
that's fun.
There are segments where you're in a mech, like a giant mech, kaiju-sized, battling.
Also fun. Hopefully.
Yeah. So the dragon segments feel very. They feel very like good breaks from the gameplay, but they feel almost like.
Is it like a rail shooter that it turns into?
No, I mean okay, to a degree. It is not Panzer Dragoon style rail shooter, right? You are often funneled through like a cave or something. There are some open areas where you're flying around, but you're often like, hey, you have to fly through this cave, right? And so in those segments, it starts to feel a little rail shootery, right? You go into a new cave and all of a sudden there's an enemy and they're firing things and like it'll almost sort of bullet hell style, like the left side of the screen is covered up by their attack and you have to dodge to the right and like this sort of thing. And like, that's fun. I think those segments they make a big first impression. And then very quickly you're like, yeah, I probably would like to get back to playing Doom.
I don't need a ton of this.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing about the mech segments. They feel like a nice diversion. They are very cool in that they do a good job of playing with scale. So when you get into the mech suit and you're walking along, you're walking through still areas that look like normal levels out of Doom. And so there will be like a bridge with a bunch of enemies on it. You know, these enemies that were overpowering you earlier in the game. And with the mech, you can just like kick the bridge and like kill all of them instantly, which is like a cool, like, you know, pyre fantasy like feeling in it. And then when you attack the big enemies, the kaiju size enemies that you're battling in this, like you can really just like mess them up. Like you can like cut their arm off or cut their leg off and that sort of thing. You either with a bladed weapon or actually just like shooting their leg so that their leg falls off and they like kind of fall over and everything. So like, it feels like a sort of, I mean, at the end of the day, it sort of feels like a dumbed down first person shooter playing the mech segments, right? Which can be fun. And so like, I feel as diversions, both of those work. But I think also by the end of the game, and I'm not to the end of the game yet, depending on how much those are used, you may get to the point of going, yeah, okay, that was fun, but like, are we doing too much of this, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like a lot of games do that when they have the like almost mini game section and you're like, oh, this is really neat as a cool diversion, but I don't need to do a lot of this. This is not the main game and gameplay. So, but in both of those, like the aesthetics of it are awesome. A couple of years ago, I talked about Metal Hellsinger and, like I think it won our badass game of the year. And this feels very much like along those lines, right? Like we have looked at a lot of 80s heavy metal covers. Remember how cool some of that stuff looked? Like, oh my God, we're going to hell and we're going to beat the devil with the power of rock and roll. And like this game feels along those same lines. It feels like a lot of things that you're seeing are stuff that somebody was, drawing in the back of their history textbook because they were bored in high school. So like when you're on the dragon's not just a dragon, right? There are pedals to the dragon. So you are like, hitting the accelerator on this dragon and stuff. So it's that kind of like stupid that it's either going to make you roll your eyes and go, this is just dumb, or it's going to make you roll your eyes and go, yeah, hell yeah. Praise Satan. All right. You've done this for us. So like, I mean, it is a big, bombastic, dumb game, but it plays really well. And I'm really enjoying it, right? Like I did not like Doom Eternal a whole lot. And like, it was fine, but it felt like a step backwards from Doom 2016. This feels like a this feels like something cool and new and different using that Doom 2016 game as a basis.
Nice.
So I would recommend it if you have an opportunity. It is on Game Pass.
Okay, I was gonna say, did you buy this game? 'Cause
No.
I feel like I looked, but I didn't see it. But maybe I just didn't look hard enough.
It came out like Thursday or Friday on Game Pass because Tuesday I think you had to buy the premium edition or something like that. You got 3 days early play, so
Maybe that's why I didn't see it then.
Yeah, it came out not on the normal Tuesday release date that games often come out on. But it is up there. It is free to play if you have Game Pass. I would say if you have Game Pass, it's worth checking this out, especially if you like Doom 2016, right? I feel like this is one that is not going to disappoint people in the same way that Doom Eternal did. All right, that does it for what we've been playing. Let's move on into the news. We teased earlier that Neil Druckmann is he was doing an interview. He was talking about Intergalactic, the big Naughty Dog game that they released a trailer for and everything. And he mentioned as part of that he is working on a second game. So he kind of talked about it as being able to bounce back and forth between these two projects. This is probably not too shocking to most people that they would be working on at least two projects. As a studio, they're big enough to work on two projects at the same time. The flip side is Naughty Dog has not released an original game for the PlayStation 5. We're 5 years into the PlayStation 5, and they have not released an original game for it yet.
I say their last game, The Last of Us 2?
I think so. Yeah, because they've done... for this generation, they did that Last of Us 1 remake.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, didn't they remake?
I think they just remade 2
both
as well, right?
They remade both of them, didn't
So
they?
maybe it's a remaster.
Yeah, I think 2's more of a remaster. 1 was a ground up remake, but that's a real game, right? They remade part 1, and certainly that was work to remaster part 2. But
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Naughty Dog has been the premier Sony studio for years, right? With the Uncharted games, with the Last of Us games, to see them kind of,
it's a big gap.
Yeah. It feels like this is part of the reason when people look at this current generation of consoles and they say, it feels underwhelming. Like when you have one of your crown jewels sort of setting out this console generation so far, that's completely understandable.
So did the Last of Us multiplayer, there's all going to be a games as a service game, right? Did that officially get canceled?
Yes.
Okay. I feel like we had talked about that, or it got talked about, but I didn't remember. There have been so many that have been canceled that was that one of them?
Well, that game, I also feel like it was so much speculation about it because it got delayed and it kept getting delayed, and then it kind of officially did finally get canceled.
That might have been the one that we had talked about. Was that the one that Bungie had said there's maybe some issues here because I don't know. Anyways, it's not that big of a deal.
No, I think Bungie had come in and told them hey, this is going to be the rest of your life at this studio. And I feel like that was the story that came out of why they canceled that essentially Naughty Dog was told, you will not be able to work on anything else. This entire studio will be full-time supporting this if it goes forward.
Yeah. And you want it to be this big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do want to say something that I thought was funny when I first saw this, mostly from my own ignorance. So apparently the subtitle of Intergalactic is The Heretic Prophet. When I had first read it, not on this, but I saw it on Reddit or Twitter or something like that, and it said something like, blah, 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 Intergalactic delays Intergalactic, The Heretic Prophet, Neil Druckmann. I was like, is that his... his wrestler name, The Heretic Prophet Neil Druckmann?
That's what his business cards say. He's not CEO. He's the Heretic Prophet.
I mean, first and
That'd be a
foremost,
sick wrestler name.
Sick as hell. Good on you, Neil Druckmann. But anyway,
that was that was Dave Lang. I believe his official title was, he was not CEO, he was C3PO was his title. And I was like,
I would do that.
I was like, good for you. Like, like if somebody made me be CEO, because like that is not a position I would actually want in most situations. I think I would have to be like, okay, well, I'm going to give myself a badass name.
A little silly about it.
Yeah. You got to have fun with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is exciting, interesting. Who knows what this will turn out to be? Is this going to be another Uncharted? Is this going to be The Last of Us 3, which has been rumored? I don't know that we talked about it on this podcast, but there was a recent quote from him where he said, don't count on Last of Us 3 coming.
I feel like I saw that as well.
Yeah. And
it's been a while since the last Uncharted game.
it was PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
They did Part 4, and then they did that standalone. I forget the name of that. Lost something?
I have no
Don't
idea.
remember.
I've never played any of them.
Yeah.
So.
I'll say my sister played them, but
You've never played any of the Uncharted games? Oh, well, you should. Those are very good games. Yeah, so
I
like,
don't know if there's been one since the movie, which the movie was a few years ago now.
no, I think all the games predated the movie coming out. There's been rumors that they would do a remake of Part 1 or a new updated remaster of the original trilogy.
Yeah.
You know, I guess we'll see. I feel like those are games that would make a whole lot of sense to port over to other consoles. Like, since they are now doing that, like I could see that Uncharted trilogy coming out on PC and Switch.
Yeah.
That would sell very well, I would assume. But, you know, we'll see. Let's see. SAG-AFTRA has accused Epic of, quote, unfair labor practices for their AI Darth Vader chatbot that they recently put into Fortnite. SAG-AFTRA, if you're not familiar, is the Screen Actors Guild is the SAG part there. They are the union for actors. And so they, part of their battle with the video game industry and also the film industry in recent years, part of the strike that happened that shut down the film industry for, I forgot what it was, like 8 months or so.
Yeah.
Has been about AI and the use of AI in film. They say that the use of this AI chatbot for Darth Vader takes actors' jobs away. And it should be noted that James Earl Jones' family gave permission to use AI to recreate his voice. So essentially, this is a chatbot where you can have the Darth Vader character say things to you or respond to you and everything in James Earl Jones' Darth Vader voice. So
This just reminded me that James Earl Jones passed away.
yeah,
Like, rip.
yeah, it's sad, right? Like one of our great actors. But his family apparently gave permission. Obviously SAG-AFTRA has its own agenda, right, of protecting actors and trying to prevent actors from being replaced. Obviously, this has been a lot of their sort of battle with the video game industry because the video game industry, very much wants to be able to say, hey, can we come in and record the basis for your voice, right? And then feed that into AI, and then we can just have the AI say whatever we want it to say in your voice. Which particularly makes sense with something like a character like Darth Vader, right? Where that voice is so famous, so
iconic.
Iconic.
Yeah.
Tied to that character. If you're making a new game, if you're making Intergalactic, it doesn't really matter that it sounds a particular way, right? Like, because you get to define how that character sounds. we have 40 plus years.
Yeah.
Of people
I
knowing.
can't come in and voice Darth Vader.
I mean, you could.
A talented voice actor could. I could not.
Well, I'm just saying, like, fans would complain.
I said, again, you could. Nobody would be happy about it, though, and that's no offense to you.
I would not be happy about it.
Luke, I am your father.
The line is, no, I am your father, not Luke, I am your father.
I mean,
I don't care enough about Star Wars to get into this conversation.
you're voicing new lines. Like, if they just wanted that line, they could just reuse it.
So true.
So,
So this is going to be one of those like Mandela effects where they're going to have him say, Luke, I am your father. And like 20 years from now, people are like, no, he doesn't say, no, I'm your father. He says, Luke, I am your father. And it's all going to be because of Fortnite and AI.
well, we could say a lot of things about Fortnite and AI and how they're going to lead to the downfall of Western civilization.
No, John Wick and Winnie the Pooh did interact with one another. What are you talking about?
Like, how do you even play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon anymore?
Yeah.
It's 1 degree from Kevin Bacon because everybody's in Fortnite.
Yeah.
Is Kevin Bacon in Fortnite?
I mean, it sounds like Fortnite should, honestly. That should be Epic's next get.
I guess Kevin Bacon is in that Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Guardians of the Galaxy are in Fortnite. So
It feels like, maybe it's too old, but it feels like Fortnite could have had like a Footloose expansion.
I
don't think they did.
It feels like they could, though.
I don't know that the kids are craving a Footloose skin.
I'm just saying they could, though.
I feel like more likely we're going to get a Tremors.
They got Metallica in there. Do the kids know who Metallica is?
They at least know Enter Sandman.
I guess.
And I wouldn't count on students knowing
I feel
Enter
like
Sandman.
Just imagine though, you turn Fortnite into a dance, into like
They've already done that.
I was gonna say it's a Fortnite dance.
It would be so perfect.
Like, that's the whole thing with like the Sabrina Carpenter skin, right? Is that everybody like gets her skin and like then they dance together.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've done that. They did that with all the K-pop idols who are in.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if there are
Everyone
K-pop
gets her
idols in
skin.
Fortnite, but there's at least
There are not K-pop idols in Fortnite, I don't believe.
the Blackpink girls are at least in PUBG. I know that. But like, just think like. The dancing is so critical to Fortnite.
I don't know
if I'm hold on, let me finish. What if Fortnite came out and banned dancing? And then
Kevin Bacon shows up.
You have your Footloose story arc for Fortnite. It works, I'm telling you.
You know, that would be the play that they should do if they were going to do that. They should ban the Fortnite
It
dance,
would be
and then
so
the savior of it is Kevin Bacon.
I'm just saying, Epic, you're welcome. That's at least everybody would be buying. Kevin Bacon turns into the Thanos, the character that comes out at the very end to 1v1 the final character.
Fine, I'll do it myself. Starts dancing.
I gotta say, when you say they've got the Blackpink girls, I don't know if that's offensive or
No, that's the group's name.
That's the name of a band.
Blackpink. The group is called Blackpink.
I know it was a joke. Yeah, I don't know how to feel about this. Like, you sort of look at it and go, okay, well, the family is okay with this. James Earl Jones signed off on his voice being used after his death. It's always difficult, right? Because you feel to some degree, and, let's be clear, Hollywood has been doing this for decades, right? They've been taking dead movie stars and putting them into television commercials to sell pickup trucks and other goofy things. And so this is not entirely new, but there is something that feels a little unseemly about it. It's
the kind of thing of like, when's someone going to now use James Earl Jones's voice to say something incredibly bad? that like,
especially with a chat bot.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's certainly got to be one of the primary worries around it. But I do think that the conversation, because I think the first thing that I thought of is Justin as well. Sort of what you're getting at is Darth Vader's voice is so specific, right? Like, yes, there have been other iterations of Darth Vader in certain ways, but like,
we should be clear that in video games, often it has not been James Earl Jones doing the voice.
But it's one of those things that like you do expect at least the voice to sound a particular way. If it's not James Earl Jones, they're emulating James Earl Jones.
Yeah, it needs to be a good voice actor.
Yeah, and so like I can see where like both, you know, Epic is like, no, like we want this to be the sound because this is as close as we can get. And, you know, there may be some, I could also see James Earl Jones's family be like, no, this is one way that like we get to see like our loved ones like legacy continue to persist as well. And so like I don't think this is one where it's just a very clear cut and dry, this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer. Because I certainly respect SAG-AFTRA's position as well. Yeah. And so it's there's a lot there.
We have certainly recast iconic characters like Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse and these sorts of characters over the years, but we did not have this technology.
Are you sure Walt Disney isn't cryogenically frozen to...
No, I'm not sure he's not cryogenically frozen. But
get
like
the original Mickey Mouse back.
I mean, you sort of look at it and go, okay, well, you know, if we had this technology 30 years ago, does Mickey Mouse's voice change? Right? Or do we just keep, you know, using the same Mickey Mouse voice with this technology? And, you know, I always come back to the bigger issue, which is that what are we losing in performance?
Yeah.
Right? Because it's one thing to be like, oh, James Earl Jones had that very distinctive voice. Somebody can emulate that. People have emulated that.
Yeah.
Part of what made that character iconic was, right, his delivery. And that's very difficult to emulate with AI. Like you can get it to sound like Darth Vader, but can you get it to have that same sort of delivery, that same sort of gravitas?
Do you lose the humanity when you use a robot to like recreate
a robot?
Yeah.
A cyborg at least, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, right? Like I don't feel like AI is there yet. I feel like every time I hear AI voices, I'm like, ugh, like, you know, there's sort of a disgust to it.
Yeah. There's a feeling for me when I hear AI voices that feels like when we first heard when Chris Pratt was first getting cast as all these voice roles.
Right.
Of like, there are real voice actors out there who can do this. But then, like you said too, like having his family involved with explicit permission of like,
right,
this is a way to still.
It's
a messy situation.
Yeah, it's a little like aural Uncanny Valley or something. Yeah. And so yeah, like I said, I think this is an interesting story to continue to like look at and see like what direction it ends up going.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me. They did a little short animation for the 100th anniversary of Disney animation.
Oh, that's right.
That was so good.
That sort of brought all the characters from the past 100 years of Disney animation together.
Once Upon a Studio, that's what it was.
Right. And one of the things that people kind of got upset about when they were watching it is that it features the genie from Aladdin and he is talking, right? And it sounds like Robin Williams. And one of the questions was this AI emulating Robin Williams' voice? And it wasn't. It was actually unused lines that he had recorded originally for the Aladdin films. And, you know, like, I get that, right? Like there's a sort of like, are you grave robbing to some degree when you like go and recreate something like this? And, you know, these are both beloved actors, right? This isn't not to be dismissive towards voice actors, but like this is not some unknown voice actor that nobody knows, right? Other than like the most diehard of fans. These are actors that people have very like emotional ties to, right?
Yeah.
They have seen them in plays and in movies and stand up and television and all these different areas, right? They're not just known for this voice.
Yeah. And I think that's where this is going to sound like a joke, and it sort of is, but I don't know any other way of describing it. It's sort of like, is this like a morbid Weekend at Bernie's situation where just sort of like propping up this person and like pretending they're still here doing a thing.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
That's a very dated reference, Mario.
Well, you know,
do not use that in class. Your students will not get it.
well, I mean, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's interesting to watch and follow. And I'm happy that SAG-AFTRA is holding them to account on this.
Yeah.
Right? At least calling it out, because I think maybe the calling out makes other companies a little bit more hesitant in how they use AI going forward.
Well, and this is one where it's like, at least if they're calling it out, they can legitimately be like, we have this permission, right?
Yeah.
We're not just doing this.
Yeah.
Which I think, like, at that point, SAG-AFTRA may still be like, well, we wish you would cast somebody new to, like, let somebody else, like, develop their career. Right. But we're not going to get in the way of this anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
But then it also makes a statement of, like, if you don't have this explicit permission, you don't get away with it.
Sure.
But if you do, you get to...
Well, Harrison Ford is, like, in his 80s now, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're not that far off from somebody going, hey, like, we can just use his voice now, right? Or Carrie Fisher, for that matter, right? Carrie Fisher is passed on. So, like, they are not using Carrie Fisher's voice in this. But, like, let's be honest, like, how far away is somebody from trying to do that? And I mean, I guess, you know, partly probably not, because her daughter is still around, right? But like,
her daughter's very active on that's, but yeah.
But you know, like if you did this with Carrie Fisher, if you do this with Harrison Ford, if you do it with somebody that you don't have permission for, right? What is the reaction? And we know what the reaction to Rogue One when they used they weren't using AI, they were using just CG, but like to try to recreate her and some of the other characters. And, you know, there was a sort of backlash from a lot of fans over that.
Well, this is one place where, like, to put it kindly, enthusiasm of Star Wars fans can maybe be used for good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I think fans sticking up for these, I mean, it's always weird to say stick up for these actors, but there are people who are more powerful, more rich than these actors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the people making these calls.
Yeah.
And I will certainly defend James Earl Jones against Epic, which is sort of a shitty company.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Hideo Kojima has, I don't know how long it's been, 1 or 2 years ago, announced that he was going to make a new espionage game.
Feels like 2 years ago.
Yeah, sort of in the style of Metal Gear Solid. He can't do that because those bridges are burned. So he was going to create his own new franchise. The title is Fizzent, which I don't know if that's just like his working title or that's going to be the actual title of the game. But anyways, he announced this week that game is still 5 to 6 years away. So people, you know, he has several projects going on. Obviously, Death Stranding 2 that's coming out this year. He has that horror game.
Isn't he doing
for
the
the
thing
Xbox.
with Jordan Peele?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Well, maybe if that's still going,
Sure.
we'll
Yeah.
see.
He said he was doing a thing with Jordan Peele at one point.
I feel like he announced like 6 different games, and like at least one of them's coming out this year, so we'll see. But this game being 5 to 6 years away, you know, we're talking next generation consoles. This is going to be PlayStation 6. This is not a PlayStation 5 game at this point. This is Switch 4 or something. We are very far down the road from actually seeing this anytime soon. Speaking, though, of the legacy that we were just talking about, he claims to have also left a USB stick full of game ideas for after he dies.
I love that for him. It's just...
He's such a weird guy, and like it's what makes him so enjoyable in the industry.
I think that's almost like whoever has access to that USB, you better not touch it, because I feel like nobody is going to be able to accurately recreate the weirdness that Kojima has envisioned. Because I feel like what it's just going to be. Well, like, I'm just imagining a USB with like one Word doc and bullet points of these crazy ass ideas.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say it depends on how detailed the lists, the ideas are.
Yeah, is this like actual good game design documents, or is it, as you say, is it bullet points?
Because I could see Kojima just being
man
like,
that drops bombs, but also wears rollerblades.
Yeah. I mean, look, if it's a Karnov / Bomberman mashup, that does sound like an amazing game. You're mocking it. I would play that game.
I don't know that I think Mario's mocking anyone other than Kojima trying to do it.
I'm just thinking about the literal Fat Man character from Metal Gear Solid 2. I just like...
So you're thinking spinoffs? Half the ideals are spinoffs.
I guess I just think like if you were to read that,
yeah,
you're like, what are you talking about? And that's where I just feel like I don't know if anybody can fully recreate the craziness that goes on in Kojima's brain, and I mean that only as a compliment.
Well, like one of the game ideas he mentioned, we didn't have this in the news rundown, but he had mentioned wanting to make a game where if you leave the game long enough, right? Like, so
I saw this.
You don't play a game for 6 months and then you come back to it, that the skills of the character would have atrophied.
Yeah, I did see that as well.
Yeah, the character would forget.
And, you know, like I think that if that's the sort of idea he has down on this USB stick, that's a huge, you know, that's like me saying, I have a really great idea for a video game. And like there's a big difference between that idea and being able to implement it. Now, obviously Kojima can, as a director, implement that, right? He has done this over and over again with like crazy, weird ideas for games, right? That's what his entire career has been. But I think you're right, Mario, like somebody else picking that up and looking at that idea, do they make that an actual fun and interesting game? Because on the surface, that idea sounds insane.
Yeah.
I think to me, I think it's almost better if it's those kinds of ideas though, because at least it's like, that's an idea that you can then like build the story around, right?
Right.
Because you could put that into, I don't know, any sort of setting, right? You could make the new
That could be the next Tony Hawk.
Right? The new Ghost of Tsushima game or the new Tony Hawk game. Like, I haven't skateboarded in 12 years. I got to figure out how to do this thing again. Whereas like, I feel like if it's just these like random plot points or these characters, I'm like, I don't know if I trust that to be developed by anybody other than Kojima.
Well, and we saw what happened at Konami when they tried to make a Metal Gear game without him. They made that zombie game, and you know that game was mostly torched by fans. You know, and I think this is always the problem with the like sort of auteur theory, right? Yeah. Especially when it comes to something like video games. Video games are made by hundreds or thousands of people most of the time, right?
Yes.
There's always that weird thing like an Undertale or something. But even that, right? Like for these newer games, he's had to employ more people to come in. Those aren't solo projects.
Well, and like you said, that's the exception, not the rule.
Right. And so like the whole idea of the auteur theory that like you have this one person and the video game is exclusively their vision, it's difficult to say how much of those Metal Gear games were Kojima's vision and not the people working under him, right? Like no doubt he had a big impact. But to say like every decision made in those games was coming from him is probably unfair to the teams that were working on those games.
Sure, absolutely.
And so, you know, like I think to some degree you look at this and you go, well, he's been building, Kojima Productions. He has this team. A lot of those are people who worked on the Metal Gear series with him. They've now been working with him for years, making the Death Stranding games and supposedly these other announced projects. So you do kind of wonder, how much is he involved day to day with those? Or is he still like sort of this big picture guy of, oh, here's my broad idea, and then he's like coming in and offering feedback? Or is he in there day to day, like tweaking things, So like maybe, it's the Miyamoto question, right? Like everybody loves to give Miyamoto like credit for all these Nintendo franchises, and he certainly helped create them. But Miyamoto's not making the Zelda games anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's not even making the Mario games anymore, right? Like he's not involved day to day. He comes in and offers feedback.
He might be part of the conversation of like the inception of the ideas, but that's maybe about it.
Yeah. And so, certainly a hugely influential figure in the history of games, right? But like he's trained people to take the ball and run with it. So, you would hope that Kojima has done the same thing here, that there are people in that studio who could pick up one of these ideas and, like you said, build something around that core idea. But yeah, I mean, this adds to his like legacy, right? This
Just
eccentric,
like the mythos of Kojima, right? USB of ideas.
And then you just wonder, like, where is that USB stick? Is he like wearing it on a chain around his neck?
I was gonna say the fact that he says he left it. I'm like, so are you not updating it? Like, is there another USB stick for new ideas?
I imagine
Kojima's one of those guys that like he's got the whole like somebody is going to be in his will and they're going to have to like blueprints their way to get this USB.
I just imagine him at like 2 a.m. one night being like, oh man, I've got so many of these ideas. I better write them all down.
But I got to add this to the
And then like there's a safe, and that safe is behind like a large vault, and then there's like
the vault is behind
pit.
a painting.
Yeah, there's like a pit you have to swing across. It's the ending of the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yeah.
Like you have to like reach this, and there are people dying, and there's the ghost of Kojima going, "You chose poorly." I hope that's how this works.
It's like, this is the final test to determine if you're weird enough to make my games.
Do you think enough outside the box, right?
Yeah.
Like to solve these riddles? Let's see. Final Fantasy XI. That is that's the MMO, the original MMO before they made 14, which is the one that gets talked about now. So Final Fantasy XI, they were ready to shut it down last year. It's kind of amazing to think it's still running right now, but they were basically ready to shut it down last year, and the director credits the fans for keeping it alive, saving it, and they are continuing to do updates this year, 23 years after its original release.
I love fans.
Which is
I love when fans are honored in this way.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, when you think of the number of MMOs that are still running, right? Like, so World of Warcraft is about that age. I mean, I think it's a little older than that. I believe EverQuest is still running, the original EverQuest. But, a lot of these MMOs have shut down over the years. And so it's kind of a testament to those diehard fans, right, to keep this game running for 23 years.
Well, and especially, like you said, 14 is there too. So it's not even like, okay, this is the only Final Fantasy MMO option.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of old school RuneScape, where like they shut it down, and the fans were like, no, you have to bring that back, and so they did, and that's, I think, old school RuneScape is probably as popular as, if not more popular than the newer iterations that have come out.
Yeah.
Well, they did that with WoW Classic or WoW Vanilla. Like, that was a project originally started by fans, and then Blizzard said, no, we'll just do this ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, interesting to see, that sort of fan support is being honored in keeping this alive. One would hope that maybe when they get to a point of wanting to shut this down, of Square wanting to abandon it, that they might turn over the tools to let fans keep running it.
That would be cool.
One does not feel like Final Fantasy XI is keeping people from playing newer games.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is not hurting their bottom line.
Yeah.
There probably are some people who play this and don't play 14, but I would imagine most people have moved on and, at least tried 14.
Yeah.
Let's see. A data miner who had revealed a lot of updates to Multiversus. That's the WB Smash Brothers style fighting game. Has now teased Injustice 3. So this is the DC Comics fighting game in the style of the Mortal Kombat games made by the same studio, NetherRealm. So they had been doing Injustice as their sort of off game from Mortal Kombat. So they would do a Mortal Kombat game, do an Injustice game, do a Mortal Kombat game, do an Injustice game.
Yeah.
And then they have now released 2 Mortal Kombat games in a row, because when they started development on Mortal Kombat 1, the most recent game, that was when all the sales talk was going on that WB would sell their entire game division. And, obviously if NetherRealm was in the middle of developing a DC Comics game, they would not have the rights to that if they were no longer part of WB. Mm-hmm. And so that seemed to be the reason that they didn't make an Injustice 3 at the time. Now those sales rumors have kind of died down, in part because my favorite part of this was Warner Brothers wanted to sell NetherRealm, but they didn't want to include the Mortal Kombat license in selling them. And everybody was like, well, what use is this, right?
Yeah.
The entire value is the IP of Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
They don't want to sell that because obviously they want to make movies and merchandise and everything else off of it, not just the games. So anyways, it sounds like maybe, they could be working on Injustice 3. Some credibility is added to the story by the fact that they just announced Mortal Kombat 1 Definitive Edition, which seems to hint that there will be no more DLC released for Mortal Kombat 1. Mm-hmm.
But will it be out on the Switch 2 with decent graphics? That's the question.
Well, that was 11, wasn't it?
No, that was Mortal Kombat 1 that had the terrible graphics on Switch.
Are you sure that wasn't 11? I thought that was 11. Maybe it was 1.
I think
it was
sure
1.
It was 1.
Okay. Well, who knows? If they release that definitive edition on Switch 2, they should give that as a free update.
For $10, you can get the Switch 2 version.
Well, that what would be really horrible is if they did that $10 upgrade, which I wouldn't even think would be crazy. But if they did it and it was just as broken,
still as bad.
Well, it's broken in whole new ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyways, they this would make sense, I guess. I don't think you can turn around and make another Mortal Kombat. Yeah, I think if you make another Mortal Kombat at this point, you have to do a radical departure. That series feels like they've made too many of those games in too short of a time.
Yeah.
They need a break.
I also feel like there's just, I don't know. I mean, I know that that's what they make, but I guess I just feel like there's been a lot of fighting games that have come out in the last 2 years.
Right.
We got a new Tekken, we got a new Street Fighter. Mortal Kombat 1 is still not that old. And so it almost feels like, I don't know if this is the market we want to necessarily put a new Mortal Kombat into. So Injustice is at least going to hit a very specific demographic.
I was going to say that's going to carry the DC weight.
Well, and you kind of wonder, when would this game come out? So are they thinking holiday this year or sometime? I'm assuming probably more likely next year, maybe next spring or something. And then you start thinking, well, okay, they're relaunching the DC film universe, right? So we have Superman coming out this year. We have the Peacemaker series, the second season of that coming out sometime this year. We have the Supergirl film coming out next year, I think. So assuming those are hits, right? Assuming those do well, then you have this game coming out in the middle of all that. And even if it's not based on the movies, it doesn't,
it doesn't matter. It's still the characters.
You would assume there might be some skins, like tied into the movies, but it would be the characters. People, you would think, people who are fans of the film would want a game, right?
Yeah.
To tie into that in some way, and that would be, I think, really cool. Like a really good timing for an Injustice 3 to come out.
That's a great point. I had seen the trailer for the Superman movie, but I forget that that's like a brand new thing, and they've got a whole deal that's coming out after it.
Well, they've got the Supergirl movie, and they have another movie coming out, I feel like next year.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Well, then somewhere in here we'll get the second Robert Pattinson Batman.
Is Blue Beetle part of that?
No.
Blue Beetle is the last one from the DCEU.
Okay.
At one point, they were hinting it might be, and then that film didn't do very well. And I think they just...
Which is a shame, because it was a great movie.
Well, I mean, oftentimes good movies do badly, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And
when you've got a track record that DC had up to that point, I imagine people probably weren't running to the theaters to see it.
yeah,
we're getting Swamp Thing. We're getting Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow.
Swamp Thing a movie or okay.
So then are the Robert Pattinson Batmans
Those
part
are
of this?
not part of it,
Okay.
but they're yeah.
What about
DC is just kind of a mess.
What about it's not Christian Bale.
Are we getting a Clayface movie?
Christian Bale, the old Batman.
That's not
trilogy.
that's not the one I'm thinking of. What's his name? Colin Farrell.
The Penguin.
The Penguin. Is that
That's
part?
of the
That's
Batman
part of
films.
Yeah, that's part of the
okay,
Robert Pattinson.
Anyways,
Hey, even weirder is the first season of Peacemaker is part of this, but not all of it. So they're going to retcon part of that first season.
well, because it's the John Cena, right?
Yeah.
And that goes back to the other Suicide Squad,
Right.
which was like sort of also connected to the previous Suicide Squad,
Right. And the Justice League shows up in that first season of Peacemaker. And so they have to retcon that out.
Well,
Because it's the old Justice League.
sure,
Yeah.
They're trying.
Okay, so we
Yeah.
we have confirmed Superman, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, Clayface, which why Clayface is getting a movie, I don't know, but whatever.
So true.
Because the guy who makes all the Stephen King adaptations wrote it.
Oh,
he
okay.
wrote it as a spec script, basically.
Okay, that makes sense. The Authority, which I don't know. The Brave and the Bold, which is supposed to be Batman and Damian Wayne. And then Swamp Thing.
So do we know who the new Batman is going to be?
No.
Nope. We know that Jason Momoa is Lobo in the Supergirl movie.
So he's no longer Aquaman?
No.
So silly.
Do you think that's going to prove confusing for casual fans?
Yeah,
Because I think it is.
it's
They just, you know what?
gonna be so...
Frick it. George Clooney. Bring him back as Batman.
They
I
did.
mean, he did.
They did already do that.
Yeah, in the Flash movie, he comes
thought-
back at the end.
They
It's
had
George
him
Clooney.
and Michael Keaton in
Yeah.
that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's Ben Affleck in the beginning, and then they screw up the timeline, and it's Michael Keaton, and then when
I
he
guess
comes
you-
back,
I
it's
guess you
George
can't
Clooney.
have Val Kilmer anymore.
Yeah.
No.
You know what? Is Adam West still alive?
No.
No. Well. All right.
Yeah, the DC universe is just kind of a mess. Said with love,
I mean,
as a DC girly.
that Flash film was supposed to reset
Yeah.
the universe, and then the other films in the franchise were bombing, and so they just gave up with that Flash film.
And he
Yeah.
just said, wipe it all.
Yeah,
And we're
because
starting brand new.
they were going to
Yeah.
reset the universe with Michael Keaton as Batman again, and then they just they abandoned that because Michael Keaton was going to be in that Batgirl film that they never released.
Yeah, the Leslie Grace one, and like Blue Beetle was supposed to be the start of something fresh, and then James Gunn came in and went, nah. So like Blue Beetle is like not quite connected to the old DC movie EU, but like not really. It's such a mess. Like as a DC girly, DC, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean they're trying to start fresh. We'll see how it works out.
What I'm hearing is Blue Beetle is basically DC's Blade. It's not really connected to any of the other ones that have come out.
Well, no, like, you saw that Deadpool film, right?
Oh, that's true.
Blade is connected.
Yeah.
Blade is just cooler than most of the Marvel films.
I think that's a fair statement as well.
That's completely understandable if your reaction is Blade doesn't feel like he hangs out with any of these losers. I don't think Blade is hanging out with Ant-Man.
No, he's hanging out with Elektra and Gambit and them.
Who's the other one? Oh, it's original Human Torch is the other one that's in that.
Yeah. Chris Evans as Johnny Storm.
Sorry for the spoilers for people who haven't seen Deadpool versus Wolverine.
A movie that's over a year old now.
I mean, honestly, I would understand if people had been marveled out to the point where they hadn't seen it yet.
Let's see. Bungie has pulled their marathon gameplay video. This is after artist Fern Hook says her art was used without permission in the game. So apparently she had designed some posters, and art from those posters was used in the game. So Bungie, originally these accusations came out. She had screenshots showing how her art was used. Bungie said, hey, we're investigating this. And then they came out and said, hey, we found that an artist had ripped this off. And I mean, much to their credit, they said that they were going through everything that artists had worked on.
I see.
And they were pulling any art from the game that was, using this artist's work.
Yeah, that this artist had plagiarized.
Oh, cool.
Right, that the Bungie artist had plagiarized from Hook.
Yeah, I was unsure of how this was being worked, but now I understand.
Yeah.
Good on Bungie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the basic thing. I think they have to do that literally, but good on them for not actually doing it.
I was going to say for not making a stink about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, like, we know this has happened in the past. We know that people who, particularly, I feel like it always relates back to DeviantArt in some way, that artists had put work up there and then something very similar shows up in a game or into a book or something else.
Yeah. And
then often the response, I feel like traditionally has been, well, you're nobody. Right? Like, we're a giant corporation and you're a nobody on the internet. Plus you have put your work online and it's free for anyone to use.
That's Hot Topic did that all the time.
Yeah. Bungie could, I mean, I don't know who Fern Hook is, but like, you imagine if they wanted to, they could turn this into some big thing, and with all the resources that they have available to them, probably squash whatever type of problem this would have been for themselves. So, but like I said, I almost am like, I don't know if like saying good on Bungie is like, again, this is what they should be doing, but we probably have more than enough examples of other companies not doing that.
I was going to say, even Joey Drew Studios, people who made fan art for Bendy and the Ink Machine, and then Joey Drew Studios took it and used it with, there was a fan art contest that they had permission in a little way, and they just like went way off, and then when the artists tried to be like, hey, Joey Drew Studios was like, meh. And like that's obviously a way smaller studio than Bungie, and the fact that they could still get away with just being like, eh.
I mean, this is, Bungie is owned by Sony now, right? So they are an 800-pound gorilla. Sony has a team of lawyers because they, obviously not just video games, but electronics and film and music and all these different industries. They have a team of lawyers. They could have made this woman's life miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And made it very hard, made it very costly so that even if she won, she didn't get much out of the situation. And I think it is worth saying credit to them for saying, hey, we will make good on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and, it's hard to know. Like, there are lots of artists. When we look at games now, right? Again, this goes back to that question of something like Undertale, where you maybe have 5 people working on the art, right? In a situation like Marathon, you have potentially hundreds of people working on this game. The idea that anybody in the studio would know that this person is, stealing something, right, is very difficult. And so when we start looking at something like this, you go, well, okay, when it's called and brought to their attention, they go, hey, we're going to do our best to make good on this. And what more can you really ask for?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like, well, it happened, and there's no way to go back in time and stop that it happened, but they're doing the right thing now.
Yeah.
Right. And, good that this got caught before the game shipped.
Yeah.
Because then I think it becomes much more difficult. At this point, they can fix it, relatively easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a massive patch that you'd have to do, and that's something that at least they can do with some amount of like time and getting it right before people that have their like a first impression with it actually in their hands.
Yeah.
So, it is a crappy situation, but I do believe some credit goes to Bungie for trying to make good on it. Let's see. Italian site PokeNet has released direct comparison images of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet running on Switch 1 compared to Switch 2. We already knew that Nintendo had announced, okay, well, there's going to be an update to these. You're going to see improvements graphically to the game. We didn't know quite what that looked like. What they did is they opened up the game, the official screenshots of it running on Switch 2. They opened up the game in Switch 1, tried to take similar comparison shots at the same point in the same location from the same angle. There are very noticeable details in the background. Like, for example, one of them has a building in the background. You can see the windows in the building, and they're much better rendered and everything. But like the big detail that is instantly noticeable that grabbed everyone's attention is that the world has many more Pokemon in it. So when you're looking around in the world, instead of there being like maybe 2 or 3 Pokemon, there's more like 7 to 10 Pokemon in a screenshot. So obviously the world is much more populated. I know that was one of the criticism fans had of the game, was that you made this game sort of an open world Pokemon game where you can walk around, see the Pokemon, but like there's no Pokemon to be seen in a lot of situations. If this is, in addition to an increase in resolution and certainly a stable frame rate, which was one of the big complaints, this seems like a decent upgrade to these games. And Alicia, you're the big Pokemon fan. I'll let you address that.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Because as much as I love the storyline of Scarlet and Violet, the visuals leave a lot to be desired. And so, like, getting to see, and, we knew that it would be better on Switch 2 because it's going to be able to run better. But getting to see this gets me hyped to, like, I don't know the last time I turned on Violet. I'll probably turn it back on once I get my Switch 2. And like go check it out and play with it again and be like, the world is pretty now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a radical update in the graphics, but I feel like just adding more Pokemon to the field makes this game feel, just more alive, right? Like,
yeah.
And particularly if they fix that frame rate, because I know I watched some gameplay of this, and it just scared me away from even playing the game.
Yeah, the frame rate was pretty bad. There was a lot of like, particularly, and I dodged this because I didn't play it like immediately when it came out. But like the first couple days, there was a lot of glitching and like disappearing Pokemon, or like they'd be like halfway through the bridge or something.
Right.
And so it definitely is a game that needs that visual. I mean, it was no Mortal Kombat 1, but it was pretty bad.
What truly is.
Yeah. But so getting to see again, and I expected that it would happen, but seeing it is still building excitement.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this. I feel like this is one of the free updates, right? This is not something they're charging for.
I think so.
So looking at this, my reaction was, okay, well, this is more than I expected. I expected a stable frame rate. Like, why even bother? If you're not going to fix the frame rate, why even bother touching this? So I expected that much, but to see like an actual bit of a glossing up on the graphics and everything actually makes this like I'm a little bit more impressed than I thought I would be with it. Let's see. Speaking of Switch 2, Red Dead Redemption 2 appears to be coming to the Switch 2 this year, along with updates to the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X versions. This is just another one of those, games from the last decade that people with just a Switch did not get to play. That, we've talked about Cyberpunk and Elden Ring, some of these like big Game of the Year candidate games. This is another one. So like if you've only had a Switch over the last decade, right, you're getting to play these top tier games. This is another opportunity to play one of those top tier games. And that's really cool to me. I don't think this isn't going to sell copies to somebody like me, but like if you are that person, right? Like I feel like these games are going to be very popular that first year or two of the Switch's life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll say they're the kind of games that I would like put on my Christmas list. Mm-hmm. Like I'm probably not going to buy it myself, but if someone wants to buy it for me, I'll take it. And so like seeing that it's coming to Switch 2, I'm like, okay, might go on the Christmas list this year.
Let's see. Jade Raymond has left Haven Studios. This is the studio that she founded under PlayStation. They were developing Fair Games. That game has rumored to have now, in part in response to this and in part to other factors, I'm sure, has now been delayed to next year. That's the rumor. That's not an official statement from Sony. We talked about this in our chat quite a bit because this is now, I think we said, the third straight studio that Jade Raymond has in part founded and then left without ever releasing a full game under her direction, at least.
Yeah, I think the only one was whatever the battle Star Wars Battlefront 2 that she was in charge of Motive Studios, but I don't know how much she had a hand in that game.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Jade Raymond, I guess like got started with the Sims franchise at Electronic Arts, but really made a name for herself at Ubisoft. She had a hand in the early Assassin's Creed games, but also into multiple other franchises under them.
At least the first Watch Dogs. I don't know if she was there for the second Watch Dogs, but definitely the first Watch Dogs.
I think Far Cry 3 or 4. she was involved with.
At least one of them.
So like she had a run there, like what we sort of think of as the golden age of Ubisoft.
She's got a resume, that's for sure.
And has made her a big name in the game industry. And she left Ubisoft and I guess originally went to Motive.
Yeah. I believe founded Motive.
Yeah. And was there working, I guess in part with Amy Hennig when they were doing the Star Wars game they were working on.
Yeah, I think they've released a couple of the Star Wars games. I don't remember whatever the Squadrons, I think was the one that came out right after Battlefront 2, but she was gone by that point.
And Amy Hennig left before her game got released as well.
I know Jade Raymond then went to EA and was like the vice president working in their Stadia stuff.
You went to Google.
Excuse me. Working with Stadia, and that obviously fell apart. She left there, founded Haven Studios, and is now gone from there as well.
Yeah, reading this, like I don't know the details. I don't know what's gone on behind the scenes. I don't really want to speculate because, you don't ever know. Like, you don't know what has been happening. It's easy to point a finger and say, oh, there's something wrong with her. But, like, we don't know what's been going on behind the scenes. Certainly the Stadia situation was a clusterfuck all around. It's hard to point at one person and blame them.
Yeah, I think that's the other day. We don't know the situation. We don't know her. But it's also, I think, fair to say that on paper, it looks odd. It doesn't look great, but, also, again, we don't all know all the details and probably never will.
Yeah.
Well, maybe this is one of those situations where you go, someday she's going to retire from the game industry and it'd be really cool if she wrote a book.
Yeah. Did some big interview or something like that.
Yeah. It sort of reminds me there's a similar situation going on in the film and television industry with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And the connection to video games is that she was given a deal that was paying her an insane amount of money, like into like 9 figures, like hundreds of millions of dollars, to come and develop projects for Amazon Prime. And she originally had a deal, I think it was like a 5-year deal, and basically nothing came out of that deal. And then they re-upped a deal paying her less this time, but she still has not produced anything out of that deal for Amazon Prime. And the connection to video games is that one of the things that she was supposed to be working on was the Tomb Raider reboot. And it was unclear if that was going to be a film or a television series, something that she was going to be in charge of writing and producing, maybe directing, or, and some other involvement on screen. And for those who don't know Phoebe Waller-Bridge, the TV series Fleabag is maybe what she's best known for, but she's also been brought in to like work on the James Bond films as a writer.
She produced or directed the first season of Killing Eve as well.
Yeah.
Similarly, she also had a run, a big run.
She's in the last Indiana Jones film.
Yeah.
She does a voice in one of the Star Wars as well.
Yeah.
Rogue One, I think. She's like one of the
robots. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, very, very talented, not just actress, but a writer as well. Like somebody who is perceived as to be a really unique voice and a very talented writer. And I sort of bring this up because a friend and I were talking about it recently, and like we were both kind of like, we don't know what's going on, and it's really kind of depressing because like this is such a talent, and you don't know what's going on that's preventing them from producing something. It seems sort of insane at some level. I feel like Waller-Bridge has received a lot of flack in this situation, and I keep saying, well, we don't know what's been going on, right? We don't know what's been going on behind the scenes, why something is not being produced. And I feel the same way about Jade Raymond, that, it's very easy to sort of dismiss her and say, wow, she's really screwed up. She hasn't done anything. And you don't, she's worked for Electronic Arts and Google and now Sony. And we know all three of those companies have in various ways fucked over the creative people working for them.
And Ubisoft.
Yeah, well, okay. But at least she did have a run there at Ubisoft before that all went, before she left.
And I think the other thing when it comes to any sort of creative endeavor, whether it be a TV show or a movie or a video game, those are just also hard to make, right?
Yeah.
We were just talking about with the Kojima thing. We're talking about potentially, getting together and aligning the efforts of like hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Well,
and that's not easy to do.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. I was like, it's a very different skill set to be the CEO of a company than it is to be in these other roles of like, the roles that she had at Ubisoft where she had her great run.
Right.
And so it's like, it could just be, maybe that's not her skill set. That doesn't invalidate the work that she did in her skill set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the other question is, what does this mean for Fair Games? This was obviously one of their live service games. We have seen Sony sort of just, it seems like they kind of just want to burn that entire endeavor and like move on from it. So you do kind of wonder, with the head of the studio leaving, did she see the writing on the wall?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Is this a situation where this game maybe needed a little bit more time and Sony was like, starting to have conversations of, do we just cancel this? And she said, hey, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm not dealing with this. Are we going to find that out? And how much of this is Sony, how confident is Sony? How supportive is Sony of this? Do we ever see Fair Games get released?
Well, I think that's such a big question. To be what is probable. Well, we don't know the timeline, of course, but like maybe the next one to come out after Concord as well. Like you don't exactly. It's one thing if you're like the first one to come out after Helldivers,
right.
But to be the first one that comes out after Concord, that's a different type of pressure.
Yeah.
And a different type of like expectation that I assume Sony's also like placing, in the sense of, we can't give you more time to work on this thing. We need to get this out now. Which, is maybe not the case if the rumors are true that they are delaying it. But I could see her just being very much just being like, nah, I'm not, this isn't what I want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that well poisoned at this point? Did Concord and everything else, right? Like you were talking about the Uncharted game.
Last of Us.
Last of Us, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
The Last of Us game they were working on.
Like the Suicide Squad one, that was...
Yeah, that wasn't Sony, but yeah.
But just
we have
big
many examples.
Yeah.
A big industry swing, right? That is that well poisoned at this point where can anything release in the wake of Concord? From Sony, right? Does Sony even want to take that risk at this point? Yeah. They certainly don't want another Concord. They don't want another game they're going to have to pull after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like that was a big black eye for them. I feel like that embarrassed Sony.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just say we hope that Jade Raymond lands somewhere where she can, get back to making the sort of projects that she's obviously very skilled at.
Yeah.
I will also say that she's been a very positive voice for women in the game industry. And, that's always a good thing to have people out there who, have that podium to get up and speak on that behalf. This is just kind of an update that Apple is continuing to block Fortnite from returning to the iOS App Store. Epic has said, hey, we might go back to court over this. This doesn't seem like this is ending anytime soon. This is one of those situations where I feel like you're like, whoever wins, we lose.
Yeah.
Like just let them. It's the Godzilla line. Let them fight.
Yeah.
Like, I like Apple, but Apple has been very has behaved badly in this situation, and Epic, as we kind of talked about earlier, has a bad track record of a lot of things. So, Nintendo has detailed Switch 1 updates for Switch 2. This has mostly been improved frame rates and higher resolution, adding HDR to a lot of the games. There are a few games where they were talking about adding some like new features, so that game share feature where you can share a game from one system to 3 other systems, both Switch 2s and Switch 1s who are local to you. So like if we were sitting here in the room, one person had the game, they could share it with others. I know they talked about Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, that offering 4-player over game share. So that, one of us could have a copy of that and the other 3 could play. So they're adding some of those obvious features. Game Builder Garage is adding mouse support, which is interesting because that Game Builder Garage feels like something Nintendo forgot they released. So to hear them doing any sort of update for that is kind of neat. They are adding updates for ARMS, which again feels like one of those games Nintendo sort of forgot about, and to see them doing any sort of update to ARMS seems really cool. And we should also note these are the free updates. These are not the paid, like Kirby and Zelda ones. You're gonna have to pay $10 to $20 for. Those updates, the full list of I think it's about 12 different games. If you search online, you can find those now. And we're not going to run through those because it's different for each game. But it is neat to see them actually putting those details out there. Speaking of Jade Raymond, in the wake of Assassin's Creed Shadows' success, Ubisoft has announced they are delaying their other major titles. They're vague on the specifics of what these titles are, but people assume this probably means the next Assassin's Creed game. This probably means the next Far Cry game. Think they're major franchises. They're probably delaying the next iterations of those to give them more development time, because that's what they did with Shadows. Shadows came out and was both a critical and commercial success. So it seems like Ubisoft, the most obvious thing in the world, if you give people more time to work on these games, the games will be better.
What a concept.
Just pump one out every single year.
Yeah. I mean, they did that for so long with the Assassin's Creed games, right? And like we knew like that we saw very high profile examples of that. Some of those games released in very broken fashions. What was it? Unity, the France set one, Assassin's Creed Unity.
I have such little experience with any of them. But it felt like Origins was kind of like their turning point of like, okay, we're going to try something a little different here. And Origins, Odyssey, I think was very high, well received. I don't know about it as much about Valhalla, but I mean, Shadows has been well received. I mean, so it's even just like, what if we put one out like every other year?
Yeah.
Or every 3 years? That's still a very quick timeline. And so
it's the same problem that Activision has had with the Call of Duty games, right? Like as an independent company, not owned by Microsoft, there was this perceived need. They had to put out a new Call of Duty game every single year to pay the bills, because those games are selling 20 million copies a year. And now that they're owned by Microsoft, I mean, they're still putting them out every year, but you do start to wonder at some point, do they go, hey, let's take 2 years?
Yeah.
Well, it's all of those little things, because I feel like it's the same thing we talk about with like the Madden games as well, where it's just like, this doesn't feel like a new game. It feels like the same game you put out 3 or 4 years ago. And that makes sense because you haven't really had a ton of time to like develop much on it. Like you just got to get the bare bones and the foundation down, and all those other things is what takes all that extra time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in a sports game where you're essentially making the same game year after year, right? Like we can joke about Call of Duty being the same game year after year, but they're making entirely new levels, an entirely new story, versus football does not change dramatically year to year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, right? So you're changing like the
New football.
well, I mean, they do change some rules here and there, but like, for the most part, what you are changing is the pass mechanics to some degree year to year.
Next year, the Super Bowl, there's one combined team.
Now introducing football 2.
Well, I mean, they did make chess too.
Yeah.
So that's a game you can go play right now. It's very interesting. I mean, well, speaking of Electronic Arts, they did this back in the early 2000s with their golf games, right? So you got like Cyber Tiger, and you had Tiger like you were like in a World War II battlefield where like ships were shooting like bombs onto the island. You were like having to hit your golf ball around it and stuff. And it was like, how do we make golf new and interesting year to year, right? Because golf doesn't change. And you can add more courses and you can tweak the mechanics, but you can't make a wholly new game.
Yeah. And I think they started just making those like every other year. I don't think they put out a new PGA every year.
Well, and, like when you talk about Assassin's Creed, do we need a new Assassin's Creed? I understand from a sales perspective, it helps. Mm-hmm. But like, I just feel like there's too many of those games. Like I haven't played all those games. So many of those.
Yeah.
And I actually like those games.
Well, Assassin's Creed is another one. Well, we'll get to our big question. There are a number of things we could talk about, and Assassin's Creed is one of them as well.
Yeah.
So anyways, I don't feel like this is bad news for Ubisoft. I hope that maybe companies can figure out financially how they can balance this, right? Of maybe not rushing a new game out every single year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last bit of news, I think this broke last Tuesday right after we had done the podcast. The name for the Mario movie sequel has leaked out. And the title, they basically, Universal had sent out a press release and it had upcoming films, and mixed in there was the title for this Mario film, which they then re-released the press release with that deleted, which okay, like we're not dumb, Universal.
Yeah.
We all saw that. So the title is Super Mario World. What do you think about that as a title for the second Mario movie?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like they should have called it Super Mario Brothers 2, The Lost Levels.
That would have been cool. That would have been a deep cut.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with it. I will be interested to see what they do, like what they add, what comes back. It teased Yoshi right at the end of the first one.
Which makes sense with this title.
Absolutely. And so, yeah. I mean, if anything, the only disappointment is that means that if that's sort of the track record, we've got to wait, oh man, probably some number of years for the Mario tennis movie to get Waluigi in it. But, it is what it is.
I mean, I think the thing that's kind of interesting, you're skipping over 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. 2 is not a shock, right? Because Nintendo of Japan sort of pretends 2 did not happen to some degree. The American 2, I guess we should say. And then, but you are skipping 3, right? So you're not making a film that's like focused on airships and the Koopa kids, which, again, they've sort of retconned. Those aren't Bowser's kids anymore.
And 3 is, I mean, feel like a lot of people consider 3 to be maybe the best NES game that exists.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of people think that's the best Mario game, the best 2D.
Yeah.
I think World is, but like I completely can understand why.
You're not going to argue too much about it.
What? No, I mean, those are both great games.
Yeah. I think that is interesting. But I mean, you also recognize that they aren't completely like, forced into doing a certain thing because this is called Super Mario World.
Yeah, I was going to say, it didn't even occur to me that they would be skipping other games to adapt this.
You certainly expect certain things. Like, I will expect there to be certain aspects in this if that's the title that they're going to use. But, like, I want to say they had Shy Guys in the first one, and the Shy Guys don't come around until Mario 2. Yeah. They obviously had the
Ghost House,
the Mario Kart section of the movie, and so like, they're not like forced to like completely abandon certain things. So I could certainly still see aspects of an airship. I would love to see that. I think that would be great. But I don't necessarily mind this title.
Yeah, I was gonna say it didn't even occur to me that they were skipping other games to adapt, because I'm like my comic book brain. You know, the example I think of always is Captain America: Civil War. I'm like, the Civil War movie is nothing like the Civil War arc in the comic books, and that's okay. It's doing its own thing, but so I'm just like, okay, we'll see. Depending on how many of these they make, when will they start doing the Fast and Furious thing of let's just shove a number in wherever we can, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that I thought about when I first saw this was we are getting a Mario Kart World game this summer for the Switch 2 launch, and packed in with the system, the next Mario film that comes out next spring, right? Is it 2026 that's coming out?
That sounds right.
Is going to be called Super Mario World. So, like, they're playing off of that, you know, that title there. They have Super Nintendo World at the amusement parks, at the Universal Studio Park. So, like, that world branding seems to be something they're playing off of right now quite a bit. And so, as a title for this film, that makes a whole lot of sense. I hope they take some risk with this second film. And like I said, I thought that first film's fine, but like I didn't love it as much as some people did. So I would hope that they'll take some more risk with this, because they've set the baseline, right?
Yeah.
And so it almost feels like some of the Marvel films and stuff, where they come in and they do the like most basic story for the first film, and then you're like, okay, can you play with them now, like, and do some kind of fun things? I feel like the first Captain America film, which I like quite a bit, feels very much that way. And then they came back with Winter Soldier, and like that's an amazingly good film.
Yeah.
And it felt much like, they said, okay, well, we introduced Captain America. People aren't laughing when they see him.
I'll say it's very much that, like, let's get the first one out there and, like you said, kind of play it safe of like what you can do with this character in this world. And then now that people are on board with that, now we can push it a little further.
Okay, we made $1 billion. Great. Now we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is the James Cameron mentality, right? Like, you suckers bought Avatar. I'm going to make another one. It's going to be even weirder. And then, like,
they made 5 of them.
Yeah, he made another $2 billion. So, anything that happens from here on, you're all responsible for. All right, that brings us to our big question. Mario, you've alluded to it a couple times already. Is there a game franchise you've been hesitant to jump into, and why? Alicia, how about you start?
Well, it's funny. Assassin's Creed is one of them for me too. Like when the early games were coming out, and then like I remember when the movie came out, and my parents were like, "Yeah, we'll go see the movie," and Amelia and I were like, "We also kind of want to play these games, but there's just so many, and it's such a mess." But the answer I was actually thinking of earlier, and I think this is my reason for not getting into a lot of game franchises, but the one I'm going to say is actually the Yakuza games. And it's the fact that I want to play them myself. I don't want to like watch other people play them. I want to experience them. And so somewhere in here I have to find a way to do that. Make that time and make that effort.
Yeah. And because those are big games, those aren't like 8-hour games. Those are games that can take you, dozens of hours to get through.
Yeah, and it's like, I know, Mario, I know you love those games. Like, I think my sister has watched a couple of playthroughs that she really loves, and I'm like, I'm intrigued. I want to do it.
I will say, Zero is a really nicely like self-contained story. You could play Zero and never play another one and probably be pretty satisfied.
Okay.
obviously there is so much more that goes.
Zero's coming out on Switch too.
That is, yeah.
You say that's the other thing. I haven't had the system for it, so being on Switch too, I'm like,
Like, I think Zero is such a good, like, if you like this, check out the other ones. If you don't like it, then you probably know that you'll be good to not play any of the others.
And that's such a weird franchise too, because those games have shifted. So what is it with part 6 is when they did the shift?
7.
Okay. Those are entirely sort of an entirely different genre of games, from being brawler beat 'em ups to becoming a turn-based RPG.
Yeah.
yeah,
I will say, I think for a lot of people, for myself and for other friends who have played them, the big shift is going from 2 to 3 because they remade 1 and 2. So 0, 1, and 2. I mean, 0 is just a newer game, but they remade. Yeah, they remade 1 and 2, and then shifting back to number 3, which has never been remade. It feels like a very different and very old game.
okay.
Because those are PlayStation 2 games, right?
3, I think, was a PlayStation 3.
Okay.
Because I want to say they have a 3, 4, and 5 bundle that were all on the PlayStation 3. But anyways, that would be my recommendation still. I play 0. If you like 0, continue to check them out. But I think, like I said, you could play through 0 and be satisfied with just that story.
Okay.
Cool. Mario.
Yeah, I think there's a number of answers I could give. And the primary reason is I'm the dummy that has to play from the beginning of a series. If I'm going to play Assassin's Creed, I've got to play Assassin's Creed 1 and then 2 and then the other
I'm so with you.
45 of them before I get to Shadows.
I'm so with you.
I tell you, Assassin's Creed 1 is a very difficult game to go back to. Like, those games sort of came into their own with 2, and so it's difficult to go back and play 1.
Hence why I just played through Vice City. I didn't play the first 2 Grand Theft Autos, but those are also completely different games. Just in what they're doing. And
it's also Grand Theft Auto London.
Oh, and I probably wouldn't play like the PSP games or anything like that, but I think that has held me back because it's just like, if I'm going to play through it, I'm going to want to play through all of them.
Yeah.
Particularly if there's some sort of connected story between them. Like Final Fantasy, I don't necessarily mind because those are self-contained.
Yeah.
Right.
But like Kingdom Hearts, to have to go through and play all, like, I don't feel like you could jump in with Kingdom Hearts 3. You could, maybe you could, because honestly, it's not going to make any sense to you if you play through all of them anyways. But like a lot of those that just like, I don't want to spoil your answers, Justin, but I came in and saw your answers and I was like, those are the first 2 games that came to my mind as well. So
you did mention one of them.
I'll let you mention the other one because it's for the same reason. But it's there are so many game franchises, and the primary reason is wanting to experience all of them,
right,
but knowing how many games that's actually would require me to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true for me with some games where the story really matters from game to game. Like, Grand Theft Auto, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, there's sometimes some connective tissue there between games, or there are like Easter egg references to things from the previous games. But like, you can really play those games pretty much independently.
I guess I will say one more thing. Well, I'll let you say your answer first, and then because it's tied to the Grand Theft Auto one as well.
Okay. So, usually most games aren't too dependent on that. So, I know, Mario, you mentioned the Final Fantasy games, right? Where, unless you're playing 10-2,
sure,
like the other games don't really matter in any way.
You don't have to play 7 to understand 8. It's a complete original story to itself.
Yeah.
No, and the only reason that it matters is, some of the sort of Easter eggs, right, that come back and you're like, oh, right, like that's something that's from this game, right? Yeah. It's not storyline connected, but it's, mechanic directed or character design.
I say it's like Moogles and Chocobos you're going to see in every game.
Yeah.
Right.
Sid.
Sid.
Yeah, and some of
Biggs and Wedge.
Some of that stuff is fun, and so I think you get some benefits from playing those games over time, right? So yeah, I listed 2 different things here. One of which you already mentioned, which is Kingdom Hearts. So I played the first Kingdom Hearts game, and I have just never.
When did you play it?
I played it originally,
Okay.
like on PlayStation 2, like maybe not right at release, but not too long after release, like a year or 2 after release or something.
Yeah.
And then I have just never played the rest of those games because at some point it got so convoluted that I was like, I don't feel like I don't want to play all these side games, right? Like if I could just play Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and 3, like I might be interested. In fact, I think I might have bought the complete package on PC, and at some point because I thought, well, I will play those. But there's so much of me is like, I do not want to play all these side games.
Yeah.
Like it's too much of an investment.
I don't want to have to play a rhythm game in order to understand the next part of the story.
Yeah. And I mean, like just the idea of like this sort of, action RPG involving Disney characters is very appealing to me. I did not think Kingdom Hearts 1 was an amazing game, but like that's me personally, right? I know lots of people love that game. But like I thought it was interesting enough, right? And like fun enough. But man, like at some point that franchise felt like it got out of control. And yeah, I know we've joked about it on here before, but like I think that is a barrier to a lot of people.
Yeah. No, I mean there is a reason that we spent 8 years just begging for Kingdom Hearts 3 and they kept releasing side games and we were like, okay, we'll play them. Please give us Kingdom Hearts 3.
Which is why they kept releasing those side games, because they knew people would keep playing them.
I do think you can fairly self-contained do 1 Chain of Memories 2. I do think that little arc is fairly self-contained.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are things you can do without.
But definitely I can see how, I understand how the amount of spin-offs, and again, it's not especially with doing spin-offs, then it ends up not clearly named, and then you get all their like 1.5, 2.5, 2.8, or it's like, what I need Wikipedia to even tell me what order I'm supposed to play these games in anymore.
Those games at some point feel like those lists of this is the definitive way to watch Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like where it's like, well, you can watch these first 8 episodes of season 1, and then you should watch this, and then you should go back and watch these 4 episodes. And you're like, man, that's way too much homework. Like, can I just watch the damn thing at some point?
Yeah.
They put out a list of that with Andor and like Rebels, the animated Star Wars show.
Yeah.
And then there were some other like tie-ins there. And I was like, that's too much homework. Nobody wants to do that kind of homework.
Yeah.
Like you're making your shows. I mean, we were talking about Marvel. It's sort of the problem with the Marvel shows, right?
I was gonna say I did that for Marvel in phase 1.
Yeah, it was particularly when they started doing the Disney Plus TV shows, right? Like it became a little too much homework.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that. The other one I mentioned is Persona, and I have played one of the Persona games. I played Persona 4 Golden on the Vita. And I very much enjoyed it. That's a good game. But those games take so much time.
Yeah.
And so there's part of me, every time they release a new Persona, right, I'm like, oh man, that looks like fun. They, put out 5 and then put out that remake of 3. I'm like, those games are pretty good. That would probably be fun to play those. But I do not have 100 hours to dedicate to that one game. Like, I mean, you all know from doing this podcast and everything, there's a lot of games that I get, 5 to 10 hours into, and I'm like, okay, I've played enough of that. Like, I know what that game is. Unless it's really connecting with me, I'll probably just quit at some point. I didn't do that when I was young. I was more of a completionist, but now there's just too many games to play.
Yeah.
And so those games just feel like way too much of a time commitment for me personally. And I don't say that like happily, because like I think they look really cool and people really like them. I just don't know when I would have time to actually put the time into them.
Yeah. The other thing I was just going to say, connect sort of similar with Persona is, the first one I would want to play is 3. Mostly because I know if I play 5 and start with 5, from what I've heard from just about everybody, it's hard to go back and play the previous ones. Right. Just because of all the quality of life things that they've added to it.
Yeah.
And that 3 remake, I feel like, has brought it more up to par.
Yeah. But I know that's the case with the Grand Theft Autos, right? If I played 5 and then tried to go back and play 3 or Vice City,
right?
No, there's no way in hell I would have ever done that. And so I think that's also part of it, is wanting to go through and experience that like development, that like, oh, I can see how they're building on this, or this thing didn't work as well, and so they changed it for this next release. Like wanting to be able to see that makes it so like going back to a previous one is so much more difficult. And so that's kind of why I think has also made it so I've held off on starting certain games or franchises.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Assassin's Creed works that way. Like Assassin's Creed 1 is not a great game compared to other entries in the franchise, right? And so like what you really want to do is play 2 and Black Flag and some of the other ones later in the series. And I think some of those games work as like, I'm going to play this game sort of individually on its own. Black Flag, I know in Assassin's Creed that's just basically a pirate game. Like so you can just kind of pick that up and play it, and you don't really, the story connective tissue basically disappears after 3 in those games. Like there is still some there, but like tying those games together is not nearly as strong as it starts off in those early games. I mean, to the point where in some of those later games, it's almost non-existent in them. But yeah, I mean, I completely get it. People looking at franchises and going, well, I don't know if I want to start and try this. I even get that with something like Final Fantasy, for exactly the reason you're talking about, Mario, of wanting to see that progression.
Yeah.
Like the progression of 1 through 6, like Final Fantasy 1 compared to 6 feel like entirely different games in a lot of ways. And then, then you get the 7, 8, 9, and 10, which feel like an entirely new evolution, right? Of the more like cinematic movie-like presentation of modern role-playing games. And then, they get like kind of experimental with 12. And, then you go, do you even play the MMOs at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously those are going to be completely different. And then 13 is 3 games in and of itself.
Yeah, do you play the spinoffs?
Yeah.
Right? Because like even 4, you have the after years with that.
It's true. There's like 7 games as well.
I was going to say 7 has a whole universe.
Right. You have all those spinoffs from it. Like, do you play 7? Do you play the remake games?
Yeah. Do you bring in Dissidia at some point?
Well, there's Crisis Core, there's Dirge of Cerberus, there's all of.
Can you even play Dirge of Cerberus anymore? It's never gotten a re-release.
But yeah, I think it's one of those things that it does make the time investment for games as compared to like if you really wanted to watch all the Marvel movies, you could do that, and it wouldn't take you. I mean, it would take you a long time, but like you could do that if you were to watch like 2 each weekend. You get through them in a couple of months.
I was saying you can do that passively.
Yeah.
Versus playing all of these games, you have to be more active if you're playing them. You can watch a playthrough and experience it more passively that way, but...
Yeah, I had a friend, we were talking about the new Final Destination film, which I went to see, and they were asking like, oh, well, I think I only ever saw the first 2 maybe, and I never saw the other ones. Are they worth seeing? And I was like, like you're talking about there's 3 that you haven't seen. That's 6 hours of your time. Do you think it's worth 6 hours of your time? Like, I mean, those films are what they are to some degree.
No.
That 5th one has one of the great twists in film history in it. And so that's like really cool if you've seen the entire franchise to watch that 5th one. But, like they're not like heavy story dependent from film to film. Like you can watch that new one without really having seen any of the previous films. But you know, that again, that's like 12 hours of time to watch that entire film franchise, right?
Yeah.
12 hours of time is less than any of the games we're talking about alone just to play through.
Yeah.
Multiple times over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the case of Persona, right? You're talking about 100 hours. You're talking about
might be able to watch all the Marvel movies.
and the shows, right? Like, so yeah, I think that's where it gets crazy with video games. And that's one of the reasons I would tell a lot of people, again, something that's changed for me over time. Like, you don't have to be a completionist. Mm-hmm. There's too many video games out there. Like, if you just want to dive in and sample a game, if you get that game cheap enough, right? Like, I get if you spend $60, you want to milk it for all it's worth. But like, if you're buying the game on sale for $5, you really just need your $5 worth.
Yeah.
And, you know, you go to a movie, it's, you know, matinee might be $5. So, okay, 2 hours of time is your money's worth out of that game. And, you know, any more is just gravy on there. So I think if you can do that, if there's a game that you're interested, just, you know, pick it up and sample it, get a few hours into it and see, you know, does it feel worth it? All right, that does it for this episode. So thank you, Alicia and Mario, for joining me. Congratulations again to Alicia. Thank you for those of you listening. As always, you can check out more at salukigames.com. If you have suggestions for the podcast, questions, suggestions for the big question, you can send those to justin.young@sau.edu. We like to receive those. That saves me the effort of having to write a big question each week. So those are always beneficial to us and everything. We will be back with a new episode soon. I think we're going to see how long we can go, if we can get to the Switch 2 release. I don't know if we will. We're looking at all of our schedules and how that's going to work out, because it is the summer where people have travel and different things they have to do. Some of us have to actually move. So we'll see how all that works out and everything. But we're hoping maybe the next 2 weeks we'll be doing episodes before we have to take our summer hiatus. But thank you again for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode. Till then, play something fun, maybe one of these games that you've always put off.